I am Skyler. And let me tell you about the 10 minutes that ended my marriage and started my revenge. The soup was still boiling. I know that because I felt it. The second it hit my scalp, I felt my skin scream. Hot potato leek soup, the one I'd spent 3 hours making from scratch that morning, now dripping down my face, my neck, soaking into my silk blouse. The one I'd bought special for tonight. The one I thought would make me look put together in front of Gavin's family. I stood there, frozen, trembling. Gavin towered over me, the empty tureen still in his hand, his face twisted into something I didn't recognize, something cruel. Something that had been hiding beneath the surface of our 12-year marriage, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. "You've got 10 minutes, he said. His voice was ice. 10 minutes to get out of my house, away from my family, and out of my life, forever. I blinked. Soup burned my eyes. Or maybe those were tears. I couldn't tell anymore. Behind him, his mother Patricia sat at the head of the dining table, dabbing her mouth with a linen napkin like she'd just finished a perfectly pleasant meal. She wasn't even pretending to be shocked. She was smiling. His sister Claudia? She actually clapped. Slow, mocking applause that echoed through our dining room, my dining room, the one I decorated, the one where I'd hosted every single holiday for a decade while his family criticized every dish. Every decoration, every word out of my mouth. Finally, Claudia said, raising her wine glass. "About time you grew a spine, Gav." There were others. Friends. Colleagues. People I'd invited into our home. People I'd cooked for. Laughed with. Trusted. And now they sat there like an audience at a show. Some looked away, some looked uncomfortable, but none of them, not one, said a word. My husband's best friend Marco even snickered. I wanted to scream. I wanted to collapse. I wanted to ask why, what had I done to deserve this? But my throat was closed. My voice was gone. All I could do was stand there, shaking, while potato leek soup dripped onto our Persian rug. "The one I paid for." Gavin leaned in close. I could smell the bourbon on his breath. "You thought you were so smart," he whispered, "playing the perfect wife. But you're nothing, Skyler. You've always been nothing. And now everyone knows it." That's when I felt it. The weight of my purse, still hanging on my shoulder, and inside it, pressed against my ribs like a secret heartbeat. The manila envelope. I hadn't opened it yet, hadn't had time. My lawyer had handed it to me that afternoon, right before I rushed home to cook dinner for 20 people who hated me. She'd said, "Don't open this here. Wait until you're alone. And Skyler, when you do open it, don't react. Just smile." I didn't understand then. But standing there, soup-soaked and humiliated, Gavin's family laughing at my pain, I understood perfectly. My hand moved to the purse. My fingers found the envelope's edge. I didn't pull it out. Not yet. But just knowing it was there, just feeling its presence, it was like someone had handed me a weapon in the middle of a war I didn't know I was fighting. Gavin checked his watch. 9 minutes now. Better hurry. Patricia stood, smoothing her dress. "Honestly, dear, this is for the best. You were never really one of us. Surely you felt that." I looked at her, really looked at her. This woman who'd made me feel small every single day. Who'd critiqued my cooking, my career, my inability to give her grandbabies. Who'd whispered poison into her son's ear every chance she got. I looked at Gavin, my husband, the man I'd put through business school, the man whose career I'd supported while mine gathered dust, the man who'd promised me forever and was now giving me 10 minutes. I looked at all of them, and then I did something they never expected. I smiled. Not a big smile. Not a crazy one. Just a small, quiet curve of my lips. The kind of smile you give when you know something no one else does. Gavin's face flickered, just for a second, confusion, maybe even fear. "What are you smiling about?" he demanded. I reached up and wiped soup off my cheek, slowly, deliberately. Then I picked up my purse, adjusted the strap on my shoulder, and walked toward the door. I didn't run, I didn't cry, I didn't give them the satisfaction. At the threshold I stopped. Turned back. 10 minutes, I said softly. My voice was steady now. Calm. "You're right, Gavin. 10 minutes is all it takes to change everything." His mother laughed. Good riddance. But Gavin wasn't laughing anymore. He was staring at me, at the envelope visible now, just barely, peeking out of my purse. "What is that?" he asked. I didn't answer. I just walked out of that house, his house he'd called it, and got into my car. I sat there in the driveway for a moment. My hands were shaking again. But this time, it wasn't from fear. I opened the envelope. And I started laughing. Because Gavin was wrong about one thing. It wasn't his house. It never was. They thought they ended me in those 10 minutes. They had no idea those 10 minutes were the beginning of their downfall. The smell of coffee still does it to me. Fresh brewed, dark roast. The kind Gavin liked every morning at exactly 6:15 a.m. I'd wake up at 5:30 just to make sure it was ready when he came downstairs. 17 years. Over 6,000 mornings. And I never missed one. I didn't mind. That's what I tell myself now anyway. I didn't mind because I believed in us. I believed in marriage. I believed that when you love someone, you show up. Every single day. Even when they don't notice. Especially when they don't notice. I met Gavin when I was 26. He was charming, ambitious, full of dreams about building his own architecture firm. He had these sketches, beautiful, intricate designs that he'd show me over cheap wine in his studio apartment. One day, he'd say, "I'm going to build something that matters." And I believed him. So when he quit his job to start the firm, I picked up a second job. Bookkeeping during the day, bartending 3 nights a week. I came home smelling like beer and cigarette smoke, my feet screaming, and I'd find him asleep on the couch, sketches scattered around him like fallen leaves. I'd cover him with a blanket, kiss his forehead, tell myself it would all be worth it. It took 4 years for his firm to turn a profit. 4 years of me paying rent, groceries, utilities. 4 years of just a little longer. Sky and I couldn't do this without you. I kept the receipts. Not because I wanted to throw them in his face one day, I just liked having proof that I'd helped build something, that I mattered. When his mother Evelyn got sick, Gavin couldn't handle it. He'd sit in the hospital waiting room, frozen, while I talked to doctors, filled out insurance forms, held her hand through 2 surgeries. I took time off work I couldn't afford to lose. I brought her homemade soup chicken noodle, the kind my grandmother taught me to make, and spoon-fed her when she was too weak to hold the bowl herself. She never said thank you. Not once. But I told myself that was okay. Family doesn't keep score. Then there was Gavin's brother Tyler, the addiction issues. The stint in rehab that cost $38,000. Gavin's family didn't have that kind of money. But I did. I'd been saving for years, a little nest egg I'd built from tips and overtime, money I'd dreamed of using for a trip to Italy or maybe a down payment on a house of our own. I emptied that account without hesitation. Because Tyler was family. Because Gavin asked me to. Because I thought that's what love looked like, giving everything you have and trusting it will come back to you somehow. Tyler got clean. Relapsed. Got clean again. I never asked for the money back. And then there was Sophie. Gavin's niece. 8 years old when Claudia, Gavin's sister, decided motherhood was too much and disappeared for 2 years. Just left her daughter with us like she was dropping off dry cleaning. No warning, no apology. I became Sophie's mother in every way that mattered. I packed her lunches, braided her hair, helped with homework, showed up at every school play, every parent-teacher conference. I loved that little girl like she was mine. And when Claudia finally came back, tanned and relaxed from whatever soul-searching journey she'd been on, she took Sophie without a word of gratitude. Gavin's family had a saying about me. I heard it whispered at holiday dinners, muttered behind hands at family gatherings. Skyler's lucky Gavin tolerates her. Tolerates. As if I hadn't built his life with my own 2 hands, as if my sacrifices were just quirks he had to put up with. But I stayed. I stayed because I'd made a vow. Because I believed marriage was sacred. Because I thought if I just kept loving him, kept showing up, kept being good enough, eventually, he'd see me. Really see me. I thought my loyalty meant something. If you've ever given everything to someone who later turned away, you'll understand this part. The way you convince yourself that love is supposed to be hard, that sacrifice is proof of devotion, that one day, all this kindness will matter. Thank you to everyone who helps keep these stories alive. Every word you share, every act of kindness helps protect those who still believe in family. But here's what I didn't know then. Standing in my kitchen at 5:30 in the morning, making coffee for a man who never said thank you. Loyalty means nothing to people who treat kindness like currency, who take and take and take until there's nothing left of you but an empty account and a broken heart. I didn't know that the same family I'd bled for was already planning how to get rid of me. I didn't know that Gavin had been meeting with lawyers for months. I didn't know that the house I thought we'd built together, the one with my name on the mortgage, the one I'd made into a home, was about to become a weapon used against me. All I knew was that I loved him. And I thought that was enough. It wasn't. The intervention wasn't supposed to be an intervention. That's what Gavin called it when he texted me that afternoon. "Family dinner tonight. My mom wants to talk. Wear something nice." I should have known. I should have felt it in my bones, that electric warning that something was wrong. But I didn't. I just bought a new blouse and made soup from scratch like the fool I was. They were already seated when I brought out the tureen, all of them. Patricia at the head of the table like a queen, Claudia to her right, smirking into her wine, Tyler across from her, looking uncomfortable but not uncomfortable enough to leave. Marco, Gavin's best friend. A couple of colleagues I barely knew. And Gavin at the opposite end, watching me with eyes I didn't recognize. "Sit down, Skyler," Patricia said. "Not thank you for cooking. Not this smells wonderful. Just sit down." I sat. Patricia folded her hands. "We need to discuss your future with this family." My stomach dropped. "My future? You've been with Gavin for 17 years, she continued, like she was reading from a script. "And frankly, dear, we don't see what you've contributed." I actually laughed. I couldn't help it. "I'm sorry, what?" Claudia jumped in. "You don't work, you don't have kids, you just exist. Off of Gavin's success." "I work 2 jobs. Bartending isn't a career, Skyler." This from Tyler. Tyler, whose rehab I'd paid for. "And that bookkeeping thing? That's not real work." My hands started shaking. I looked at Gavin, my husband, waiting for him to defend me, to tell them they were insane. He said nothing. Patricia slid a stack of papers across the table. "We need you to sign these. It's a post-nuptial agreement transferring ownership of the house and the joint accounts into Gavin's name. For tax purposes, legal protection for the firm. You understand." I stared at the papers, at my name typed at the bottom, next to a blank signature line. "No," I said quietly. "Excuse me?" I said no. My voice was steadier now. "That house has my name on the mortgage. I've paid into it for years. I'm not signing anything." That's when Gavin finally spoke. "This is exactly why we're doing this," he said coldly. "You're ungrateful. You take everything I give you and act like you built it yourself." I felt like I'd been slapped. "What are you talking about? I worked 2 jobs while you—" "While I what? While I built a successful firm? While I provided this life for you?" He stood up, and I saw it then, the contempt. It had been there all along, hiding beneath every kiss, every "I love you," every morning I made him coffee. "You're a burden, Skyler. You always have been." The room was silent. Everyone was staring. Waiting. "I'm not signing," I whispered. Gavin picked up the tureen. I saw it happening in slow motion, the way his face twisted, the way his hand moved, but I couldn't move fast enough. The soup was still boiling when it hit my head. You already know what happened next. The screaming, the 10 minutes, the laughter. What you don't know is what I found out later. What I discovered in the weeks that followed, after I'd left that house with nothing but my purse and that manila envelope. Gavin had forged my signature. Multiple times. On loan documents, credit applications, bank transfers. He'd been using my credit for years, racking up debt I didn't know existed. My credit score, the one I'd guarded carefully, the one I'd built through years of responsible choices, was destroyed. The affair had been going on for 14 months. With his assistant, Meredith. 26 years old, blonde, exactly the kind of woman Patricia had always wished Gavin had married. They'd been planning their future together while I made him coffee every morning. And his firm? The successful architecture business I'd helped build? It was hemorrhaging money. Lawsuits from angry clients, missed deadlines, shoddy work. The whole thing was about to collapse, and Gavin needed a scapegoat, someone to blame. Someone to drain dry before he abandoned the sinking ship. They wanted me gone because I was in the way. Because as long as I was legally tied to him, his debts were my debts. His failures were my failures. And they needed me out before the whole house of cards came tumbling down. They needed me destroyed so they could walk away clean. If you've ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal made you question your own worth, you're not alone. Thank you to everyone who helps me tell these stories. Your support keeps this space alive for those who still believe that truth, somehow, will always find its way. I sat in my car that night, soup still drying in my hair, and opened the envelope my lawyer had given me. And everything changed. Because Gavin had made one critical mistake, one miscalculation in his carefully planned destruction of my life. He forgot who actually owned the house. The street was so cold it felt like it was biting through my clothes. I stood on the sidewalk outside what used to be my home, our home, and watched the windows glow warm and golden. I could hear laughter inside, muffled, distant, but unmistakable. They were still eating, still celebrating, still there, and I was here. Soup dripped down my neck, cold now, sticky against my skin. My hair was plastered to my head. I could smell it: potato, leek, cream, the scent of 3 hours of work congealing in the November air. A taxi passed. I raised my hand. The driver looked at me, really looked, his eyes sweeping over my ruined blouse, my shaking hands, the soup in my hair, and kept driving. Another taxi, same thing. A couple walked past, arm in arm, and the woman whispered something to her companion. They both looked back at me. I wanted to scream at them. I'm not drunk. I'm not homeless. But what was I? I found a bench under a street lamp 2 blocks away. The metal was frozen, but I sat anyway because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. I pulled my coat tighter, the wool one I'd splurged on last Christmas, back when I thought I had a future to dress for, and tried to stop shaking. My phone buzzed. Bank of America. Your login credentials have been changed. If you did not authorize this change, please contact customer service immediately. I stared at the screen. My fingers were numb. I tried to log in anyway, just to be sure. Invalid password. I tried again. Account locked. Another buzz. Ring doorbell. Access permissions updated. You have been removed as an authorized user. The house. He'd locked me out of the app, changed the codes. I couldn't get back in even if I wanted to. Another buzz. Anthem Blue Cross. You have been removed from policy #47382, GK effective immediately. For questions regarding coverage, please contact your policyholder. His mother. She'd removed me from the family insurance, the plan I'd been on for 15 years. The one that covered the surgery I'd had last spring, the one I was still paying off in monthly installments. I wasn't just thrown out of a home. I was being erased. Methodically, efficiently, like I was a name on a list they were checking off one by one. I sat there under that street lamp and felt myself disappear, not dramatically. Not with screaming or breaking or any of the ways you see people fall apart in movies. I just faded, like I was becoming transparent. Like if I sat still enough, I'd blend into the bench and the lamplight and the cold until there was nothing left. The city moved around me. Taxis honked. Delivery trucks rumbled past. Somewhere a dog barked. Life continued, indifferent, and I sat in the middle of it feeling like a ghost. I thought about calling someone. But who? My parents were gone. I didn't have siblings. The friends I'd had before Gavin had slowly disappeared over the years, too busy, too far away, or maybe I just stopped calling, stopped making time, stopped being a person outside of being his wife. I pulled my purse into my lap. It was the only thing I had, the only thing that was still mine. And inside it, the manila envelope. I'd forgotten about it in the chaos. My lawyer had handed it to me that afternoon. God, was that only 6 hours ago? With that strange instruction. Wait until you're alone. Don't react. Just smile. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were documents. Legal documents with official seals and notarized signatures and language I had to read 3 times to understand. And then I understood. The house, the one Gavin had just thrown me out of, the one he'd called his house, his property wasn't his at all. It was mine. Solely mine. Purchased in my name 8 months before we got married, using inheritance money from my grandmother. Gavin's name had been added to the mortgage later, yes, but only as a co-signer, not an owner. The deed had always been in my name. Only my name. I'd forgotten. God help me, I'd actually forgotten. We'd been married so long, shared everything for so many years, that I'd stopped thinking of anything as just mine. It had all blurred together: his career, my jobs, our house, our money, our life. But the law didn't forget. The law remembered exactly who owned what. If you've ever sat in a room so quiet it started to echo your thoughts, you'll understand this silence. Thank you to those who help keep these stories alive. Your kindness helps give voice to people who've been forgotten, who sit alone in their pain, waiting to be seen again. I sat on that frozen bench, holding papers that proved I owned the house Gavin had just banished me from, and I started to laugh. Quietly at first. Then louder. Until I was shaking with it, tears streaming down my face, mixing with the dried soup in my hair. People stared. Let them. Because I wasn't disappearing anymore. I was waking up. There was a second letter inside the envelope. I almost missed it. My hands were shaking so badly from reading the property deed that I nearly dropped everything onto the frozen sidewalk. But there it was, a smaller envelope, cream-colored, with my name written in handwriting I recognized immediately. Douglas. Gavin's father. Dead now for 3 years. The only member of that family who'd ever looked at me like I was a person, not a convenient appliance. I opened it carefully, like it might disintegrate in my fingers. Dear Skyler. If you're reading this, then I was right to be afraid. I'm writing this from the hospital. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have weeks, maybe days. I should be thinking about my soul, about making peace. But all I can think about is you. I've watched my son become someone I don't recognize. I've watched my wife poison him with entitlement and greed. I've watched them use you, drain you, take everything you give, and still ask for more. I tried to warn you once, remember? At Christmas 2 years ago. I pulled you aside in the kitchen and asked if you were happy. You smiled and said yes, but I saw it in your eyes you were already drowning. So I did something. I hope you'll forgive me for the secrecy, but I couldn't risk them finding out. The house on Riverside Drive, that's yours, only yours. I made sure of it when you bought it with your grandmother's money. I was the one who suggested keeping the deed in your name alone. Tax purposes, I told Gavin. He never checked. The rental properties in Brooklyn, those 2 brownstones you think are ours? I put them in your name 3 months before I died. Used your power of attorney from when you were handling my medical care, legally binding, notarized, irreversible. The investment account, $340,000, that's yours too. I transferred it last week. My lawyer has the documents. I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I just tell you? Because you would have refused. You would have said it wasn't right, that it belonged to Gavin, that family shares everything. That's who you are. That's why I love you like a daughter. But Skyler, my son is not the man you think he is. I've found evidence, gambling debts totaling over $180,000. Credit cards in your name that you don't know about. An affair with someone named Meredith. Business deals that are borderline fraud. Patricia knows, Claudia knows, they all know. And they're waiting for me to die so they can squeeze you dry and throw you away. Don't let them. You are the owner. You have the power. The house, the properties, the accounts, they're legally, irrevocably yours. My lawyer, Rebecca Chen, has copies of everything. She'll contact you when the time is right. Use this wisely, Skyler, not for revenge, for justice. You deserve better than my family gave you. With love and regret, Douglas. I read it twice, then 3 times. My tears fell onto the paper, smudging the ink. But I didn't care. Douglas had known, he'd seen what was coming, and he'd protected me. Even from the grave, he was still protecting me. If you've ever found truth in the quiet moments after pain, you know what this part feels like. Thank you to everyone who supports these stories. Your kindness keeps hope alive for people still finding their voice after betrayal. I folded the letter carefully, put it back in the envelope with the deed, stood up from that frozen bench. My phone buzzed again. Another notification. Probably another account I'd been locked out of, another door closed in my face. I didn't even look. Because they wanted war. They wanted to see me broken, begging, destroyed. But I wasn't going to give them war. I was going to give them silence. And silence, as they were about to learn, is so much louder. There's a moment right before dawn when the city holds its breath. I sat in a hotel room in Midtown, the kind with thin walls and a view of a brick wall, and watched that moment arrive. 4:30 a.m. The sky not quite black anymore, not yet blue, just that strange in-between color that feels like possibility. I hadn't slept, couldn't, but I wasn't tired. I was awake in a way I hadn't been in 17 years. On the desk in front of me, Douglas's letter, the property deed, my laptop, a yellow legal pad covered in notes, and a business card for Rebecca Chen, attorney at law, with a phone number I'd be calling in exactly 3.5 hours. There comes a point when silence stops meaning defeat. It becomes preparation. I made coffee in the tiny hotel pot, drank it black, standing at the window, watching New York wake up. Delivery trucks, early commuters, a woman walking 3 dogs. Life. Continuing, indifferent. But I wasn't indifferent anymore. I opened my laptop and started a spreadsheet, every financial document I could remember. Every account, every loan, every credit card. I worked methodically, like I was doing someone else's taxes. Clinical, precise. Then I started a second document, a timeline. June 2019. Paid off Tyler's rehab, $38,400. September 2020. Covered Evelyn's surgery, $12,800. March 2022. Loaned Gavin $25,000 for the firm, never repaid. The numbers added up quickly. By the time the sun actually rose, I'd documented $186,000 in contributions I could prove. Money I'd given freely, believing it was building our future. Our future. I laughed. It came out sharp, bitter. A woman in the next room banged on the wall. I didn't care. At 8 a.m. exactly, I called Rebecca Chen. She answered on the second ring. Miss Harper? I've been expecting your call. Douglas left me a letter, I said. My voice was steady, calm. I need to know if what he wrote is true. Every word, she said. The properties are yours, the accounts are yours, and I have documentation of every fraudulent transaction your husband made in your name. When can you come in? Today. By noon, I was sitting in her office in a glass tower in Tribeca, signing papers, power of attorney revocations, asset protection filings, a formal demand for accounting of all marital debts. We'll need a forensic accountant, Rebecca said. Someone who can trace every dollar your husband moved without your knowledge. Do it, I said. That afternoon, I hired a locksmith, had him meet me at the house on Riverside Drive, my house, while Gavin was at work. Changed every lock. Front door, back door, garage. The locksmith didn't ask questions. I paid him in cash. I stood in the entryway afterward, holding the new keys. The house was so quiet. No laughter, no family dinners. Just emptiness, and the faint smell of soup I'd probably never get out of the dining room rug. I didn't feel sad. I felt powerful. For years I mistook generosity for love. Now, I'm learning the quiet math of self-respect. The forensic accountant's report came back in 72 hours. It was worse than I thought. Gavin had opened 4 credit cards in my name, total balance, $67,000. He'd taken out a home equity line of credit against the Riverside property, forging my signature for $120,000. He'd borrowed from the investment account Douglas had set up for me, thinking it was joint. Another $85,000, gone. And the affair with Meredith? He'd been paying for her apartment in Chelsea, $4,200 a month for 14 months. Rebecca filed everything: fraud charges, identity theft, breach of fiduciary duty. And then we filed eviction papers. Against Gavin. Against Patricia, who'd been living in the guest house rent-free for 2 years. Against anyone who'd been residing at my property without my permission. The eviction date? December 23rd. 2 days before Christmas, the day they always hosted their big family dinner. My phone started ringing that night. Gavin first. Then Patricia, then Claudia, then Tyler, then numbers I didn't recognize, friends probably, recruited to beg on their behalf. I didn't answer. I sat in my hotel room, watching the phone light up over and over, and sipped my coffee. It's funny how silence can sound like thunder when guilt starts to echo. 1 voicemail, then 5, then 12. I didn't listen to any of them. Instead, I blocked every number, one by one, methodically, like crossing items off a grocery list. They taught me that love meant giving. Today, I'm teaching myself that love can also mean stopping. On December 22nd, I did something I'd been planning for weeks. I walked into Gavin's office, the architecture firm I'd helped build, and handed the receptionist an envelope. "Legal notice for Mr. Harper," I said pleasantly. "Please make sure he gets this today." She looked confused but took it. Inside was a formal notice of asset seizure. The business had been operating out of a building I owned, one of the Brooklyn properties Douglas had transferred to my name. Gavin had exactly 30 days to vacate or start paying market rate rent. $18,000 a month. I walked out before anyone could stop me. For the first time, I didn't need them to hear me. My silence had already spoken. And tomorrow they'd learn exactly how loud silence could be. I arrived at 6 p.m., exactly when dinner was supposed to start. The house, my house, was lit up like a magazine cover, every window glowing. I could see shadows moving inside, hear laughter, the clink of glasses. They were celebrating. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, breathing the cold December air. Rebecca stood beside me, briefcase in hand. Behind us, 2 sheriff's deputies waited by their car, engine running. "Ready?" Rebecca asked. I looked at her. This woman who'd spent 3 weeks building an airtight case, who'd traced every forged signature, every fraudulent transfer, every lie Gavin had told in my name. "I've been ready for 17 years, I said. I just didn't know it." I walked up the front steps, used my new key, opened the door. The dining room fell silent. They were all there, Gavin at the head of the table, where he always sat, Patricia to his right, diamonds dripping from her neck, Claudia beside her, wine glass frozen halfway to her lips, Tyler, Marco, a few colleagues I recognized, and Meredith, blonde, young, sitting in what used to be my chair. Gavin stood up so fast his chair fell backward. "What the hell are you? How did you—" "Hello, everyone," I said calmly. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible." I walked into the room like I owned it, because I did. Patricia's face went purple. "Gavin, call the police. She's trespassing." "Actually," Rebecca said, stepping in behind me, "she's not. Mrs. Harper is the sole legal owner of this property. You, however, are trespassing." I set my bag on the table, right next to the roasted turkey I hadn't cooked, right next to the wine I hadn't poured. "I brought some reading material," I said, "since we're all together." I pulled out the first document, slid it down the table toward Gavin. "Property deed, Riverside Drive, purchased August 2007, inches my name, using inheritance from my grandmother. You'll notice only one name on the title." Gavin's hands shook as he picked it up. This can't be." "It is." I pulled out another document. "Brooklyn Rental Properties. Transferred to my name by your father 3 months before he died. Legal. Notarized. Binding." Claudia laughed nervously. "This is insane. Mom, she's clearly—" "Forged loan documents," I continued, sliding another stack across the polished wood. 4 credit cards opened in my name without my consent. Total fraudulent charges, $67,000. That's identity theft, Gavin. A federal crime. The room was so quiet I could hear someone's watch ticking. "Home equity line of credit," I said, my voice never rising, never shaking. $120,000. My signature forged. "Your handwriting." The forensic analyst was very thorough. Patricia stood up. "You ungrateful little, after everything this family did for you." "Everything you did?" I turned to her slowly. "Let's talk about that." "Tyler's rehab, $38,400, paid by me. Your surgery, Patricia, $12,800, paid by me. Sophie's school tuition when Claudia abandoned her, paid by me." I looked at each of them, one by one. I have receipts, bank statements, canceled checks. Every single dollar I poured into this family, while you told people I was lucky Gavin tolerated me. Gavin's face had gone white. "Skyler, just let's talk about this." "We're done talking," I said. "You gave me 10 minutes to leave, remember? 10 minutes to get out of your house, your life." I leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "You poured soup on the owner of the house. That was your last mistake." Meredith made a small sound. Gavin shot her a look that could have killed. "Oh, Meredith," I said almost gently. "Did he tell you about the Chelsea apartment? The one he's been paying for with money he stole from me? $4,200 a month. You must have thought he was so generous." She looked at Gavin. He looked at the floor. I straightened up, pulled out the final document. "Eviction notice. You have 30 minutes to collect your personal belongings and vacate the premises. Anything left behind will be considered abandoned property." "You can't," Patricia started. Rebecca cut her off. "She can. She is. And if you're not out in 30 minutes, the sheriff's deputies outside will remove you by force. Your choice." Gavin's voice broke. "Skyler, please. I'm your husband." I looked at him, really looked at him. This man I'd loved. This man I'd built a life for. This man who'd humiliated me in front of everyone, poured boiling soup on my head, laughed while his family applauded. "No," I said quietly. "You were my mistake. And as of tomorrow morning, when my lawyer files the divorce papers, you'll be my ex-husband, pending criminal charges. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the silence of truth, cutting through years of lies, the silence of power shifting hands, the silence of justice, finally being served. I picked up my bag, looked at Rebecca. "I'll wait outside." As I walked toward the door, I paused, turned back. "Merry Christmas," I said. "You have 28 minutes." And I walked out of that house, my house, into the cold December night, where the air smelled like snow and freedom. Behind me, I heard screaming, crying, the sound of chairs scraping, chaos. I smiled, because silence, I'd learned, was the loudest weapon of all. After the verdict, silence became my favorite sound. It was the sound of justice finally breathing. I didn't go to the courthouse when Gavin was arraigned. Didn't need to. Rebecca sent me updates via text, clinical and brief, like weather reports. Identity theft charges, filed, fraud investigation, opened, business assets, frozen pending audit. I read them from my new apartment in Brooklyn, one of the properties Douglas had left me. Smaller than Riverside Drive, but mine, really mine. I sat by the window with coffee and watched the neighborhood wake up, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of other people's expectations pressing down on my chest. The news came in pieces over the following months. Gavin's architectural license was suspended pending investigation. 3 former clients came forward with complaints about missed deadlines, shoddy work, funds that vanished into administrative costs. The firm collapsed within 6 weeks. The office I'd served eviction papers to closed quietly one Tuesday morning, furniture hauled out by men in gray jumpsuits while former employees stood on the sidewalk, shell-shocked. Meredith testified against him. I heard about it third-hand, from a colleague who still followed the case. Apparently she'd kept emails, text messages, receipts. She'd thought she was his future. Turned out she was just his alibi. When the money dried up and the Chelsea apartment lease came due, she disappeared. Last I heard, she'd moved back to Ohio. Patricia lost the guest house, obviously. But more than that, she lost her standing. The charity board she'd sat on for 20 years quietly stopped calling. The country club membership lapsed. Someone told me she'd moved in with Claudia, and that the two of them fought constantly, each blaming the other for pushing Gavin too far. As if cruelty were something you could accidentally stumble into. Tyler relapsed. I felt bad about that one. Genuinely. But then I remembered the way he'd laughed when Gavin threw the soup, and the sympathy faded. Addiction is a disease. Complicity is a choice. The family fractured. Quietly, the way families do when the money runs out and there's nothing left to fight over but blame. They stopped speaking. Stopped gathering. Stopped pretending they'd ever been anything but a coalition of greed held together by my labor. I didn't need to ruin them. Their lies had already done that. I saw Gavin once. Months later, April. I was coming out of a coffee shop in Park Slope, and there he was, across the street, getting out of a 10-year-old Honda. He looked smaller somehow. Grayer. His suit was wrinkled, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying something heavy. Our eyes met for just a second. He looked away first. I kept walking. People ask me sometimes if I feel guilty, if I think I went too far, if maybe I should have just walked away quietly, let them keep the house, started over somewhere new. I smile when they ask that. A small, knowing smile. Because they don't understand. This was never about revenge. It was about truth, about consequences. About the simple moral fact that you cannot pour soup on someone's head, steal their money, forge their name, and destroy their life and then act surprised when the world stops letting you get away with it. They taught me pain. I taught them consequences. I rebuilt my life slowly. Started working again, real work, the kind I'd set aside to support Gavin's dreams. Bookkeeping turned into accounting. Accounting turned into financial consulting. I was good at it, better than I'd remembered. Better than I'd been allowed to be when my entire existence revolved around making someone else comfortable. I made new friends, went on dates, learned to cook for one without feeling like failure, learned that a quiet apartment isn't lonely, it's peaceful. Some nights I'd stand on my balcony and look out at Brooklyn sprawling below me, lights flickering like stars, and I'd think about Douglas, about the letter he'd left me, about how he'd seen what was coming and tried to protect me even after death. Use it wisely, he'd written. Not for revenge. For justice. I'd done exactly that. The divorce finalized in August. I didn't attend the hearing, just signed the papers my lawyer put in front of me and went back to work. Gavin kept his name, his failed reputation, and approximately $47,000 in debt that wasn't mine anymore. I kept my dignity. Fair trade. There's a photo I found while packing up Riverside Drive. Gavin and me on our wedding day, young and smiling, his arm around my waist. I'd looked at it for a long time, trying to remember what I'd felt that day, what I'd believed about love and forever and the kind of person I thought I was marrying. I couldn't remember. That version of me felt like a stranger. I didn't burn the photo, didn't tear it up. Just put it in a box with other artifacts from a life I'd outgrown and stored it in the basement. Some debts don't need to be collected. Life has its own way of balancing the books. And standing there in my apartment, coffee in hand, morning light streaming through clean windows, I realized something. I didn't need them to apologize, didn't need them to understand what they'd done, didn't need closure or acknowledgement or any of the things people say you're supposed to want. I just needed to be free. And I was. After the noise fades, what's left isn't victory, it's understanding. I learned that on a Tuesday morning in June, sitting in a cafe in the West Village, the kind with mismatched chairs and terrible Wi-Fi where the barista knows your order before you reach the counter. I'd been going there for months, same seat by the window, same black coffee, watching the city move past like a river I no longer needed to swim against. A woman sat down across from me. Mid-50s, well-dressed, but with that look in her eyes I recognized immediately, the look of someone who's been carrying too much for too long. "Excuse me," she said hesitantly. "You're Skyler Harper, aren't you? I heard you speak at the Women's Financial Literacy Workshop last month." I'd started doing that, speaking anonymously at first, then gradually more publicly, sharing my story. Not the dramatic parts, not the soup, or the eviction, or the courtroom victory, the quiet parts. The parts about realizing your worth isn't measured by how much you give, but by how well you honor yourself in the giving. "I am," I said. She pulled out a folder. Showed me bank statements with her husband's name forged on withdrawals. Credit cards she didn't know existed. A mortgage on a house she thought they owned together. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. I reached across the table and held her hand. "Yes, you do," I said gently. "You just need permission to do it." That's when I understood. Justice isn't about watching them fall, it's about standing again without hate. I used the money from the rental properties Douglas's gift to start a foundation. Small, at first. Just a fund to help women hire lawyers, forensic accountants, therapists, women escaping financial abuse. Women who'd been told they were crazy, ungrateful, worthless, while their partners drained their accounts and forged their signatures. We called it the Douglas Harper Foundation. A quiet tribute to the only member of that family who'd seen me as human. The work became my purpose. Not revenge, not proving anything to anyone. Just helping others find the truth I'd found. That your value doesn't depend on someone else's ability to see it. I thought about Gavin sometimes, less and less as time went on. I wondered if he understood what he'd lost. Not the house or the money, those were just things. But the trust, the partnership, the version of love that could have been real if he'd wanted it to be. I used to believe love meant giving everything. Now I know love also means knowing when to stop. One afternoon I visited Douglas's grave. I hadn't been since the funeral. Too much chaos, too much pain. But now, 3 years later, I brought flowers, yellow roses, his favorite. I sat on the grass beside his headstone and told him everything. About the letter, the foundation, the women we'd helped. The way his final act of protection had saved not just me, but dozens of others. "You would have been proud," I said to the marble. "Or maybe you already knew. Maybe that's why you did it." The wind picked up, rustling the leaves overhead, and for a moment I could almost hear his voice. "You were always stronger than you knew, Skyler. I just made sure you'd have the tools when you finally realized it." I wiped my eyes, not sad tears. Just the tears that come when you finally understand something that's been waiting for you all along. Forgiveness came slowly. Not for them, I'm not sure I'll ever fully forgive what they did, but for myself, for staying so long, for mistaking endurance for love. For believing that if I just gave enough, sacrificed enough, diminished myself enough, I could make someone see my worth. That was never my job. My worth was never the question. Their blindness was never my burden. If my story teaches anything, it's this. Kindness without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. I moved back into Riverside Drive eventually, renovated it, painted the walls soft gray and cream. Replaced the dining room rug, the one that still smelled faintly of potato leek soup no matter how many times it was cleaned. Turned the guest house where Patricia had lived into an office for the foundation. The house felt different now. Lighter. Like it had been holding its breath, and finally exhaled. I stood on the balcony one evening, watching the sun set over the Hudson, light painting the water gold and pink, and I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore, wasn't bitter, wasn't even sad. I was just here, present, whole. Justice gave me back my name, but peace gave me back myself. The foundation grew. We helped more women, held workshops, connected survivors with resources, created a network of lawyers and accountants who worked pro bono, started a scholarship fund for women rebuilding their lives after financial abuse. I spoke at events now, told my story openly, not for attention or sympathy, but because stories have power. Because someone sitting in the back row, afraid and alone, might hear themselves in my words and realize, if she survived this, maybe I can too. If someone pours pain on your head, I'd say, cleanse it with truth and rebuild with justice, not their justice, yours. If you've ever lost yourself trying to love someone who only saw your worth in numbers, I hope my story reminds you, it's never too late to choose yourself. Thank you for keeping these stories alive, stories where justice doesn't shout, it heals. 10 minutes. That's all it took for them to try to erase me. And 10 minutes was all I needed to become untouchable, not because I was hard, not because I was bitter, but because I finally understood the strongest thing you can be is free.